Hey everyone, I'm George Castle, and the intention of this video is to go over a couple of rules clarification that I felt needed a bit more attention or a little bit more love, just for those that are wanting to get into this game and just need a little bit more clarity, or maybe just want a quick refresher. And because I won't be doing any playthrough or extensive rules teach, you may see similar cards or actions, but that's just to set up the scenarios or examples. Now, if there are some mistakes I make along the way, I would appreciate your feedback in the comments below. That way we can all learn as a team and continue to enjoy this great game together. So let's rock. And with that being said, let's start with the setup. Now I'm just going to go through the solo and two-player setup since those have more adjustments. So let's begin with the village tiles. You're going to grab all of the village tiles and then you're going to separate them from the A's to the B's. Then you're going to grab each group and shuffle them separately. And then you're going to take 3 from each group, and the rest go back in the box. Now grab all 6 of them and shuffle them together. And then you're going to distribute them amongst the explore area. I like to start in the outer limit spaces, but you can do it in any order. These other 2 are for higher player counts. And you don't worry about this space. This one is printed onto the board, and it doesn't gain a village tile. Now let's move on to the influence track. Since we're going over the 2-player or solo setup, you're going to choose 3 influence tokens from a third color. In this case, I chose black. And you see these 3 blank spaces, meaning they don't have any printed rewards on them? You're going to be placing them on these spaces. And now those are permanent. They stay on the entire game. And let's say that the burgundy or purple color, I can't tell, but let's say that's the bot. Then what you're going to do is grab a die. And every time you roll, you're going to move up the influence tokens up that many spaces on each of the tracks. Then we're going to roll again. This time it's a 2. So we'll move this one 2 spaces. And then finally we're going to roll the last one, and this time it's a 6. And we're going to skip this black token, and there's your 6. And as we move up these spaces, the bot does not receive any of these rewards. Now these influence tokens for the bot will move as you play against the bot, and they're just meant to block you. All right, now we're going to go back to the solo setup. What I would recommend is checking each of the automa boards on the back side and seeing which one you want to play against, since each one is different. I don't know if they're necessarily based on levels. I found them each to be unique and just as challenging. But once you've selected the bot that you're going to play against, and in this case, I'll select Ethel, then you can select the color you want to play. Now, you don't have to set it up this way. This is just my preference. And the rest go back in the box. Now, let's talk about that leftover influence token that you're going to get at the end of the setup. And this one, you get to choose where you want to place it out onto the board, specifically the explore area. One thing to keep in mind is that wherever you place it, you will receive the reward from that space immediately. Now, multiple players can be on the same space during the setup. But for now, keep in mind that you're going to get the reward right away to start the game. And now you're also going to notice that most of these give you gems. But there is one that some folks have missed, and that is this particular space gives you a card. So if you want to start with another card, you can place it here as your starting spot. And this symbol means you draw a card from the deck, not these face-up cards in the market. And since it's from this deck, you're not going to know what's going to come out. But it also means that you get to take it for free and place it on any of your available workshops. Now, I would also recommend to make sure you look at your starting cards and decide which one you want. And remember, you get to tuck one under, store one on your workshop, and discard one and receive a reward from this symbol. Like this one that gives you a bump up on one of the tracks. So remember that card that we got during the first influence token placement? Well, because it was a draw action, I don't have any other options. I have to keep it and place it onto one of my available workshops. Now, let's say I cover this space. It means I get to start with 2 cards ready to be repaired and 1 tucked under. And then the last thing, don't forget that although you do get to start with a player objective card or starting quest, you also get to draw a personal quest as well by drawing it from the top of the deck. So don't forget, you always get to start with 2 at the beginning of the game. All right, now let's move on to each individual action and what they do. And there is no particular order to take these actions. I'm just going to show you in sequence based on this video. But you can choose these actions in any order. Just never take the same type of action in a row. Your pawn is always going to move. All right, let's start with the explore action. Now, for a 1 to 2 player game, you have 5 spaces that you can place your caravan token on. And it doesn't matter where you go first as long as you move at least 1 space. So if I choose to place my caravan token here, now you see these rewards here? You can get them as long as you have an influence token. So in this case, I would not receive any rewards because I don't have any influence tokens here. But you still get to perform the action from the village tile. However, these rewards are optional and you don't have to take them all if you don't want to. Now, if I choose to go to this one, and because I have an influence token, I'll be able to receive this reward, which is to draw a card. But again, I won't be able to come to this space if there's a cost. And you could tell there's a cost because each one has an arrow aiming to the right. Just like this village tile shows that there's a cost that I would need to discard 3 of my cards in order to receive this bonus. And that means 3 that are already placed on my workshops. Now, fortunately, this type of tile gives you a second option in case you don't have any resources to pay it with. But essentially, anything with an arrow, like this one and this one, there are costs involved to getting these rewards. And just as a reminder, Ignis is not part of the Explore action. You can't move your caravan token into this location. So the only way to get to Ignis is if you get bumped or you take the barter action. And also don't forget that you don't automatically get to place an influence token once you've landed there. You must have the workshop available. And if so, you must pay the yellow gem to be able to place it there. And in my opinion, I think it's actually a good thing to empty out your storage early on for these 3 reasons. 1, you have more storage space. 2, you get an additional reputation point once you've emptied that space. And 3, if you run out of influence tokens from your storage, you get to pull them from the main board anyway. But more about that later on in the video. Now let's move on to influence tokens on Explore locations. Now say that you have 2 influence tokens on one of the Explore locations. And because I have 2 influence tokens, I get to take 2 bonuses. So for this particular space, I get a choice of the type of gem that I want to get. I can also choose to have the same gem to be used for the action that I want to play. In this case, I want to buy a minor relic, which costs 2 red gems. So I'll collect the gems from this reward, and from this same turn, I can go ahead and just pay the minor relic right away. And if you get bumped, whether it's in a multiplayer game or against the bot, you get the reward that's in that space, regardless of whether you have an influence token there or not. But same goes if you bump someone else or the bot. You have to pay the reward from that space. Just for this type of action, influence tokens do not apply. We are just talking about the printed bonuses as a cost to perform that action. Next, let's move on to the harvest action. So the first thing you have to do when you perform the harvest is to roll the dice. And regardless of whether you want to use it to discover a card or you want to use it to gain more gems, as long as your workshop is available, you can pay gems to manipulate any of these dice. However, if you paid a blue gem to reduce the die value, you won't be able to turn a 1 into a 6. Only a red gem can do that. And you can increase the value of a die by paying with a yellow gem, so it can increase from a 1 to a 2. Same thing with a 6. You wouldn't be able to increase this 6 back to a 1. They don't loop like that. You also can't pay like 5 yellow gems to keep changing the die until you get to 6, since you can only use 1 type per turn. But like I said, you can pay for all 3 different types in 1 turn if you'd like. And the same goes with the tool found in the back of these relic cards. I can use this card to flip a 6 to a 1. But again, I can't use the card to increase a 6 to a 7. Remember, 6 is the maximum. But I can use this card in combination with paying gems to change the value of the dice. Now let's talk about this symbol from the influence tracks, which are similar to the symbols found in the cost of relics. So this one here and here. This symbol means you're going to remove your influence token from your storage area in your board. Now I call it storage, but I think it's called reserve. And you're always going to place them on wherever your caravan is located during this turn. So in this example, if I were to gain this bonus, and my caravan is already in this space with 4 influence tokens, which is the maximum in this space, in that case, the influence token may be placed in the influence pool, which is different than your storage area. And I like to place it here but you can certainly place it on the outside of the board as well. And the only way you can use this token from your pool is if your reserve is completely empty. All right, now I want to talk about the icons here on the track, which is to buy relics from the market, which means it is related to this symbol, not the symbols below it. When you perform the barter action, then you'll be able to perform both, but more about that during the barter section. I also want to talk about how to move these tracks. Whenever you get these types of card rewards, when you sell this card, you get to choose the reward from this card. Either move up 2 different tracks or move up 3 spaces on the same track. Now you can move up, let's say this track, skip this one, and land here. What you get is this one. You don't get these other 2 that you passed. Again, you don't get these 2, you get this one. And because there are 2 arrows, it means you can move up 2 different tracks. And you will receive a reward for each one you land on. However, when you get this card, it means you can move up a different track or the same track. And regardless of which one you decide to move, you get the reward for both. So if you decide to move this one twice, you get the reward for both of them. Now let's say you get this one. Again, you move down the track 3 spaces, and you only receive the reward on the one you land on, not the ones you passed. And of course, it is a cost because there is an arrow towards it, so you have to go back 3 spaces. But I like to think of this one as a cost and a double reward, because not only do you get an influence point from this, but you also get the reward on the track for going back. Unless, of course, you've already placed it on the reputation point at the top of the board. In that case, you can never move those. Those are there permanently. Next, let's move on to the repair action. And just to clarify, when you do perform this action, you can repair as many relics or even reserve extensions as you have on your workshop area, as long as you have enough resources, of course. And don't forget that when you do repair them and you decide to tuck them, they must be tucked under the same space of where you repaired them. If you repair this one and decide to tuck it, or as the game calls it, keep it, it would have to go down here. If you repair this one, it would have to go down here, or down here. Now, what you can't do is you can't discard any of these cards during this action. You only get 2 options. That is to sell it or keep it. The only time you can ever discard your relics, in other words, your cards, is when you have a card tucked under, like this one. Or sometimes what I like to do is make sure that my workshop is completely full. So that way, anytime I get new relics that I have to place on the workshop, I am forced to have to discard one of my cards to make space. And this is helpful when you have some discarded bonuses that you really want to get. And again, discarding is different than drawing a card, which is this symbol. Which again, it means you're immediately going to add it to your workshop. You don't have an option to sell it or tuck it, or to discard it. It has to be placed on a workshop space. Again, if it's full, just take one of these out and replace it. And then you get the discarded reward. Another type of card that rewards you more cards is this one right here that says you can discover. Which, by the way, I haven't seen any symbols that represents the word discover. It literally has to say the word discover in order for you to know that this is different from draw or discard. And discover means you are drawing a card from the top of the deck. And now you do have an option to either keep it or sell it. You don't have the option to discard it unless it follows the same rule of a full workshop. Now, I did want to talk about this type of card. If you get a chance to tuck it, if you paid this cost, the reward is that you get to place an influence token on this spot and gain a reputation point right away. So the symbol next to it doesn't mean place an influence token out onto the board, but rather to this card. Now, I like to think of this as one-time use because, first of all, you can't add any more influence tokens onto this card. It only holds 1. And second, there will never be a scenario where you would need to take an influence token from this card, since influence tokens can come from your reserve, the influence pool, or the main board. And even then, that's only for quests and global achievements. Alright, so now let's talk about this card. This card does allow you to place a maximum of 3 of your own influence tokens. You may place it out anywhere onto the board. and your caravan does not have to be in that space. And typically I like to place them in the Ignis space, but that's up to you. And again, follow the same steps of placing influence tokens. If you don't have any in your reserve, go to the pool. Or if you don't have any from there, you can take it from any of your influence tokens that are already out on the main board, including from one of the Ignis track. You can take one from here and then pay that influence by placing it back into the Ignis track and get the reward immediately. That is a legal move. And this is another reason why spending your influence early on is a good thing. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the Caravan Upgrades. The top parts will match the same design as in each action. That means they can only be placed on top of those action spaces. However, if you use the other half of this card, you can also place them in any of these spaces. And these are not instant one-time rewards. These are additional actions for each of these columns. Unfortunately, you can only have one for each column. All right, the last action we can perform is the barter action. So again, just to clarify, the only way you can move your caravan token to the Ignis space is either you get bumped from another space or you literally go to the barter action. This is not part of the explorer action. But one of the good things of having your caravan in this space is that it's the only space that provides you an instant reward whenever you have to place influence tokens out onto the board. Whereas the other spaces do not give you a reward during that turn, it's only when you land there during the explorer action. Especially when it comes to having to pay 2 influence tokens. Like this card, that can help you move up these tracks a lot faster. And you get multiple rewards in that turn. And the main action for the barter is so that you can have access to this space, which allows you to buy a relic from the market. And you also get to choose from one of these 2 bottom additional rewards. And remember how we talked about how difficult it can be to just discard a card from your workshop? And this is one of those few spaces that will allow you to do that, especially if you're trying to make space for your workshop or you're trying to gain those rewards from your cards. Now you could end up doing both of these rewards, as long as you have your workshop available. All right, so that's all I wanted to show you in this rules explanation session. Hopefully this was helpful for you as you're trying to learn the game for the first time or you're just trying to come back to it. And again, if there's any errors that I've made in trying to explain some of these rules or you want to elaborate a little bit more, please make sure to post your comments below so that way we can all benefit from knowing the rules of this great game. Enjoy!